Is Christian theology about God or about something else like living morally or getting to heaven? Let's consider. Hello philosophers, I'm Chico. Welcome to the Philosopher Channel summary of the Summa Theologica. Today we're looking at part 1, question 1, article 7, whether God is the object of this science. Also, we're filming in Albuquerque, New Mexico today, where I'm on vacation with my family. This is my mother-in-law's house behind me, so welcome. Aquinas' position is that, yes, indeed, this sacred doctrine is about God. And his reason is that the object of a science is that of which it principally treats. In this science, the treatment is mainly about God. And in support of that, he points out that theology basically has God in the name, right? Theology, study of God. So God is the object of this science. He actually has two arguments in support of this position. The first one starts off like this: the relation between a science and its object is the same as between a habit or a faculty and its object. So a little confusing possibly at first. By the word object, it just means that which it studies. So the science and its object means the science and that which it studies, or the habit and its object. Well, a habit is a quality that is hard to change. So this would be something like wisdom, health. A faculty would be something like sight. So the objects of these habits or these faculties would be things that you use these habits on, or use these faculties on. So for example, the habit of wisdom is used in judging the principles of other sciences. The object of the habit of health is the ability to perform operations that are proper to your species. So doing the things that, like for a human, it would be thinking and stuff like that. The object for a faculty like sight would be the objects of visual perception. Okay, so properly speaking, he says, the object of a faculty or a habit is the thing under the aspect of which all things are referred to that faculty or habit. Sometimes he puts things in a really roundabout way, but basically saying here, it's that thing that all the rest of the stuff that you're talking about refers to. And he gives as an example here, as a man and a stone are referred to the object of sight because they are colored, therefore colored things are the object of sight. And notice, he doesn't say this, but notice that a man and a rock are also the object of touch, of the faculty of touch, but insofar as they are heavy or insofar as they're tactile in some way. So in different ways of being, they are objects of different faculties. So again, the object of a science is that which you refer all the other stuff to, but in sacred science, all the things are referred to God. And that's either because they refer to God specifically, so when we learn something in sacred doctrine, such as that God is spirit, or because they refer to God as their beginning and end. So for example, when we look at the 10 Commandments, right? They don't refer to God well, they do in some places, but in places like honor your father and mother, they're not referring to God specifically, but they are referring to God as the author of those things and as the goal, like we're doing these things in our quest to be related to God. And everything in Scripture can fit in one of those two categories. So God is the object of this science. The second argument starts off by saying that a science is contained virtually in its principles. And what it means by that is the starting off points for your science contain everything that you can learn about in that science. You start off from the first principles and you just go from there, and everything is wrapped up in those principles. So the object of the first principles and the object of the whole science themselves must be identical. But the principles of sacred science are the articles of faith. That's where we start off from in sacred doctrine, right? And the object of the articles of faith is God. So the object of sacred science is also God. Aquinas then says there are a lot of people that are going to point out a lot of different things in Scripture that don't refer directly to God and say, yeah, but isn't it about these things? So for example, he lists things and signs, the works of salvation, the whole Christ as the head and members, basically things that we get wrapped up in when we're studying the Bible. So what about those things? Isn't the Bible about those things? And Aquinas says, no, if that's what you're thinking, you're looking at what is being treated and not the aspect under which it's being treated. Again, all those things are being treated in reference to God. So the object is still going to be God. All right, let's look at some objections. The first objection starts off by saying, in every science, the nature of its object is presupposed. So, for example, in biology, if you're going to study human beings, the nature of a human is presupposed in your science. But it's impossible to define the essence of God, as Aquinas gets from Damascene on the Orthodox Faith 1:4. But if we can't define the essence of God, then we can't presuppose the essence of God. Therefore, God cannot be the object of this science. Aquinas' response here is that in place of a definition, we use the effects of God. And he points out that in some philosophical sciences, we demonstrate something about a cause from its effect by taking the effect in the place of a definition. So in philosophy, we have something called a functional definition. Now, I don't think this is the same thing as a functional definition, right? We're not defining God based on his function. That's not what we're doing. But at the same time, it would be a similar idea. So a functional definition is something like defining a carburetor as whatever it is in an engine that mixes fuel and air. And what we can demonstrate from this definition is that the right type of combination will produce combustion. In the same way, when we're talking about causes and effects, for Aquinas, the effect pre-exists in the cause. So when we use an effect to define a cause, what we're essentially doing is pointing back to how that effect existed in the cause. And then we can go and deduce things about the cause based on what the effect is. So for example, Aquinas is going to go on to show that the fact that these effects are contingent effects proves that the cause must, the ultimate cause must be a necessary cause. Things like that. Objection 2, the conclusions reached in a science must be comprehended under the object of the science. In other words, whatever conclusions you get in the science, they have to ultimately be about the object of that science. In Holy Scripture, we reach conclusions not only concerning God, but concerning many other things though. So for example, creatures and human morality. So God is not the object of this science. And Aquinas' response here is that these things are comprehended under God. They're not comprehended under God as species or parts or accidents of God. They're comprehended as in some way related to him. So for example, creatures. Creatures aren't parts of God, sure. They aren't accidents of God, meaning like they're not like the color of God or something like that. No, they're nothing like that. But they are related to God. And that's how Scripture treats creatures, right? It doesn't treat creatures in a secular fashion. It treats them purely as creatures of God, right? Creations of God. And as creatures that have as their end goal to be with God. So it is the case that all the stuff that you find in Scripture is comprehended under the object of God. So there it is. Kind of interesting, like sometimes you get wrapped up in the details of probably like salvation. I would say is the number one thing for me anyway. I started to worry about, am I saved? What does it take to be saved? What does salvation mean? What is heaven going to be like? And, am I really sure that I'm avoiding hell? Or, like those things go through your mind and you get really wrapped up in it. But really, that's not what Scripture is about. Scripture is about God and how do we relate to God. And heaven really is just a relation to God. And so that's not really supposed to be our primary concern. It's not supposed to be, how do I get saved or how do I stay saved or something like that. That is important, of course, but really, as long as we are focused on God, then the salvation part takes care of itself. So anyway, that's all for this one. If you have any questions, please hit me up in the comments. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next video. Adios.